You ever feel like you're caught in a tug of war between what you believe in your heart and what you can actually prove with your head? It's one of the oldest, most human conflicts there is, right? This battle between faith and reason. Well, today, we're going to dive into a really brilliant idea for how to not just call a truce in this war, but to actually turn these two old rivals into powerful allies.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with this idea of a mind at war. Then we'll look at two very different kinds of God, the God of the philosophers and the one that's found in a leap of faith. We'll see how the whole idea of reason got a major upgrade, which led to this incredible synthesis where, logos met love, creating a whole new partnership for finding truth.
Okay, so first things first, we really need to get a handle on what's at stake here. Because this isn't just some dusty, old philosophical debate. We're talking about a clash between two fundamental ways of seeing the world, a divide that can mess with you on a really personal level.
And the philosopher and theologian Joseph Ratzinger, wow, he just nails it with this quote. He's basically saying that if we try to force faith and reason into totally separate boxes, we're not just creating some abstract problem. No, it's much deeper than that. We're actually creating a kind of psychological split right inside ourselves. We literally get torn between these two essential parts of what makes us human.
And here are the two teams, right? Laid out plain and simple. You've got philosophy on one side, trying to figure out the world using nothing but pure logic, no divine revelation allowed. And then on the other side, you've got theology, which starts from a place of faith. I mean, when you first look at it, these two seem like they're from completely different planets. So, the big question is, how did people first try to build a bridge across this massive gap? Well, some of the smartest people in history decided to use the one tool they trusted completely: pure, cold logic. They were going to try and prove God's existence.
And this is what they came up with, the God of metaphysics. Now, let's be clear, this isn't a God you'd pray to, this is a God you deduce, like in a math problem. Thinkers like René Descartes, they argued that God's existence was just a logical necessity, a prime mover, an infinite substance, the thing that has to exist for anything else to even be here. It's the ultimate conclusion to a philosophical argument.
Descartes' whole method was super precise. He believed the idea of God was already baked into our minds from the start, an innate concept. So he thought if you just follow a perfect chain of clear and distinct ideas, kind of like a mathematician solving a proof, anyone could logically arrive at the conclusion that God has to exist. It's clean, it's rational, but you gotta ask, is it enough?
And then, bam, everything changes. This fiery, passionate quote just explodes onto the scene. You have the brilliant mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal, who has this incredibly profound mystical experience, and his entire understanding of God gets completely flipped on its head.
So what Pascal brings to the table is this radical alternative. For him, this whole thing isn't about some idea you prove in your head. No, it's about a reality you encounter with your entire being.
See, for Pascal, this wasn't about some abstract concept. It was a direct, almost overwhelming encounter with a living, personal God. This epiphany of his suggested that, hey, maybe there are some truths you just can't get to with logic alone. Maybe some truths require our hearts, our emotions, our whole self to be engaged.
And this really shines a light on the huge problem with Descartes' purely rational God. As Ratzinger points out, a prime mover or an infinite substance, that might sound smart, but it's not a God you can have a relationship with. It can't know you. It can't understand your struggles or your joys. It's a God that's, it's fundamentally irrelevant to the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of being a human.
But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Just when it seemed like we were stuck between cold logic on one side and blind faith on the other, the very definition of reason itself went through this massive transformation. And you can thank the scientific revolution for that.
The whole concept of reason started to evolve. We went from Descartes' model, which was like pure math, right? A closed system built on ideas that were supposedly already in your head, to the model of someone like Isaac Newton. Newtonian reason was totally different. It was all about looking out at the world, observing the facts, and figuring out how things actually work.
And this was a game changer. Reason wasn't just this internal, closed-off logic anymore. It became the logic of facts, a powerful tool for engaging with the real, observable universe. And this new, much bigger view of reason, it blew the doors wide open for a whole new kind of conversation with faith.
Which brings us to the climax of our story, the great synthesis. This is where Ratzinger argues that early Christianity did something truly incredible. It didn't pick a side between faith and reason. It actually fused them together into something totally new.
Okay, so step one was a pretty bold move. Early Christian thinkers, they looked at all this Greek philosophy, and they embraced the concept of the logos, which is just a fancy word for divine reason, the underlying order of the universe. They basically said, yeah, you know what? Rationality is a totally valid path to truth. We're on board.
But they didn't just stop there. That would have been too easy. They took this abstract, impersonal idea of a supreme being, and they infused it with the absolute core revelation of their own faith. And this is where the synthesis becomes a transformation.
And this is that transformation right here. The God of pure thought, that cold, distant, unfeeling geometry of the universe, is suddenly revealed to have a heart. The supreme being isn't just supreme thought, it's supreme love. The Greeks even had a word for this kind of love, agape. It's this creative, unconditional, self-giving love.
So when you get right down to it, the highest truth that reason can possibly grasp, the absolute being, and the highest truth that faith reveals, well, they turn out to be the exact same thing. Creative love. And what that means is that the ultimate nature of reality isn't just intelligence, it's love.
So what does all this mean for us today? Well, it means we don't have to choose. It completely redefines the relationship between these two incredible forces.
Instead of enemies, they become partners in a conversation, a dialogue. Reason saves faith from becoming just superstition or myth, but faith saves reason from becoming this cold, unfeeling machine that has no way to account for things like love or meaning or the deepest questions of the human heart. The bottom line, they need each other.
And this is really the heart of the whole thing. Faith doesn't tell reason to just shut up and go away. Not at all. Instead, it gives reason a destination. It takes that philosopher's intuition of a supreme being and it reveals its true face as creative love. It basically completes the very quest that reason started all on its own. And that leaves us with a pretty big challenge, doesn't it? In our world, a world that's more and more dominated by algorithms and artificial intelligence, by pure data and rational systems, this ancient question is suddenly more urgent than ever before. How do we make sure that our powerful logic stays partnered with a heart? How do we ensure that our reason serves love? Now that is a question worth thinking about.